President Trump now saying Iran is close to making a deal to end the war, telling Fox News that could come as soon as today. Wow. He's issuing a stark new warning to the regime about what will happen if they do not come to an agreement. Alexandria Hoff is watching the back and forth, trying to discern what she can from the North Lawn today of the White House. Alex, good morning there.
Good morning to you, Bill. Yeah, so the president summarized these consequences in a strongly worded Truth Social post this weekend. Strongly worded, probably put it mildly, but in essence, he said inaction on the part of Iran to come to a resolution would have them, quote, living in hell. That 10-day deadline that was initially given is actually up today, but the president then clarified that the regime has until tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern time to open up the Strait of Hormuz, or else, separately, he said it is power plant and bridges day. That's a grave warning of sites the U.S. intends to begin targeting. The president also telling our Trey Yangst he's considering taking over the country's oil if a deal is not reached quickly. We expect more details on a statement like that and more overall when we hear from the president today. He will be taking the podium in the briefing room for a press conference focused on this weekend's daring combat search and rescue mission and what is to come, where these negotiations stand. The president hasn't made any public remarks since Wednesday and was unusually, as it turns out, strategically quiet on social media early this weekend, resuming to praise the rescue mission's success, writing this is a moment that all Americans, Republican, Democrat, and everyone else should be proud of and united around. We truly have the best, most professional and lethal military in the history of the world. Here's Republican Congressman Darrell Issa on the options the president now has.
If this regime is willing to change its ways through a negotiation that leads to a verifiable peace, okay. But at the end of the day, he'll do what he has to do.
There's apparently reporting on a peace plan that has been presented to Iran and the United States. We asked the White House about that. They said that the president has not signed off on this idea so far and that Operation Epic Fury continues, Bill.
All right, beautiful day there. Good spring day at the White House. Thanks, Alex. Nice to see you.
Let's bring in Rebeccah Heinrichs, a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute. Rebeccah, it finally might be infrastructure week if the president makes good on the threats that he made, but he's extending this deadline to 8 p.m. And I want to read to you from the UAE's diplomatic advisor. He said, "We're not ready to act as a maritime force, but we will join any American-led effort, international effort to secure navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. We are ready to play our part." Lots of different moving parts today. Where do you see it?
Well, first of all, that would be really important for the United States if we had Gulf partners actually participating in a more forward-leaning way to the U.S. and Israeli mission. I think it's important also to look at what the president is threatening here, because there's some confusion surrounding it. The president is threatening to take out bridges and power plants. Now, those are what we call dual-use targets. So civilians use them and the military, the IRGC, uses them as well. The United States will follow the laws of armed conflict, Dana. So the way we do this is we look at those targets and we see how the military is using them. Clearly, President Trump doesn't want to hit them because our war is with the Iran regime, not the Iranian people. So we would be very careful to hit only those targets that the IRGC is still using to carry out their war effort to transport missiles and drone components. We already hit a big bridge, the B-1 bridge, because the IRGC was using it to transport missiles and drones. So clearly the president doesn't want to do that, but he will do that to force the Iran regime to open the strait, obviously, is our primary objective at this point.
Senator Tim Kaine was on Meet the Press, and he says we should just stop immediately. Watch.
I think we need to end this war as soon as possible. We don't need to deploy more Americans into harm's way in a war that lacked a rationale and that lacked a plan. And then we'll work with allies and others to figure out the situation in the Strait.
While the Gulf allies think about what they want to do, what about NATO?
Well, NATO also has a role to play here. Some NATO countries, I think we've already had some European countries say that they are willing to help the United States, I think, open the strait once major combat operations are done. We have European countries that are members of NATO still allowing the United States, of course, to use their bases. Germany, the Brits, even the Italians, even if countries like the French or the Italians are restricting some of their airspace for some purposes, they're needed, Dana, for the United States. That's how we're projecting power into the Middle East from these European bases. So my hope, and it looks like the United States is working diplomatically behind the scenes, that we do have a better, more cohesive international coalition, including our European NATO partners, to open the strait.
I want to ask you one last question. I don't think we have this video to show you, but it was on X over the weekend, and it showed, I believe, Iranians apparently blocking some roads so that the IRGC couldn't get to our airmen. And we have seen very little out of Iran since this war started. We don't know what's going on inside the country. We don't see the people, what they're doing. Do you have any sense of that?
Well, we do know, Dana, that the Iranian people are broadly supportive of the American people, of the United States of America. They're opposed to the Iran regime. So I do believe that it is plausible that you would have Iranian people supporting the U.S. effort to save our heroic airmen who were in Iran. And that's also why it's so important that we do differentiate. If we do strike these bridges and power plants, that we have a message inside to the Iranian people to remind them our war is not with them. We want to leave their country intact so that they can take over their country. Our problem is with the Iran regime, which has been the one repressing them. The greatest harm and threat to the Iranian people does not come from the United States and Israel. It comes from the Iran regime. And so, of course, our effort then, hopefully after the end of this military campaign, would be to support the Iranian people to finish essentially taking over their government.
Thank you, Rebeccah Heinrichs. Great to have you on the show this morning.
Thanks, Dana.
Hey, it's Will Kane. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Kane podcast for full episodes right now.